this episode, I speak with student and supporter of women in perimenopause and menopause in conjunction with intermittent fasting, Stefanie Daniels. Key points addressed were Stefanie's personal story with integrating intermittent fasting through her intense menopausal journey induced by having her ovaries removed before she turned 40 years old. We also discussed Stefanie's current endeavor in which she has left a 22-year career in media to fully facilitate her biomedical education and further develop her expertise so that she can have a practice serving the menopausal women of her world one day. Stay tuned for my enlightening conversation with Stefanie Daniels. My name is Patricia Kathleen, and this series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas in an effort to explore the world of fasting from a variety of angles. This dialogue is meant to develop a more complete story about the information, research, personal stories, and culture in and around the science and lifestyle of fasting. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to check out our subsequent series that dive deep into specific areas such as founders and entrepreneurs, vegan life, and roundtable topics. They can be found on our website, patriciakathleen.com, where you can also join our newsletter. You can also subscribe to all of our series on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and YouTube. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the conversation. Hi everyone and welcome back. I am your host Patricia, and today I am so excited to be sitting down with Stefanie Daniels. Stefanie is a student and a supporter of women in perimenopause and menopause through intermittent fasting and a student of it. You can find her online on her Instagram handle at life_begins_at_menopause. Welcome, Stefanie.
Hi, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For those of you that are new to this podcast series, I will give a quick bio on Stefanie before I ask her to further elaborate on her own biography and personal story. And then after that, I will drop straight into asking her to define specific key terms in the fasting industry. While a lot of these seem rote, I think everyone has an own personal relationship with terms and how they define things, and it helps us more transparently and clearly understand where each personal narrative is coming from when mentioning terms. Then we'll drop straight into kind of further unpacking Stefanie's personal story as it relates to menopause and her life and her current studies. And we'll wrap everything up with rapid fire questions that those of you have written in asking me and my team to address experts and people who are kind of undergoing similar questions. So we've grouped some of those up regarding those of you who have asked questions about fasting and menopause, as well as people studying it and experiencing it, and medically induced menopause, things of that nature that I think Stefanie can speak best to with her expertise. So as promised, a quick bio on Stefanie. After Stefanie's mom passed away from ovarian cancer in 2015, she had her second baby 2 months later and then decided to get tested for the BRCA gene. The BRCA and BRCA gene. It was positive results, and she underwent preventative surgery, having a double mastectomy and removing her ovaries, which sent her tail spinning headfirst into menopause. You fast forward to March 2020, in the beginning of lockdown. She was still miserably experiencing menopausal symptoms, and it started to affect everyone in her society and around her. She stumbled across Cynthia's Thurlow's TED Talk on intermittent fasting and how it helps with these symptoms, and her IF journey began from there. During lockdown, she was traveling into town 5 days a week and then dealing with other tasks of being a full-time working mother, but suddenly found she had a lot more time on her hands, and so she had a career shift, which I will ask her to unpack later on, after 22 years in the media industry. So, Stefanie, I want to kind of first drop into asking you if you would be so kind as to further unpack a little bit more about that story. You tested positive for the BRCA gene. You had this preventative surgery. And when you say it sent you tail spinning, I'm hoping you can kind of describe symptoms, what that looked like, in more in-depth information for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you've kind of summarized it really nicely, and it's very difficult to work out where to start from because I guess there was so much in that journey, but I'll start from what was the beginning for me, and that was what felt like the end, really. And out of all those experiences I'd been through, losing my mum, having my second child 2 months later, having a double mastectomy, which was quite a massive operation in itself, and then having my ovaries removed, which if you look at that on its own was quite simple. I mean, I had keyhole surgery, so on paper that should have been the easiest one. I had time to come to terms with my mum passing away. You know, we had 9 years of getting our head around it, and I had time to say goodbye to her. So when she finally did pass, it was a very, very peaceful passing, as much as it could have been, and it was a beautiful ending, you know, if you can call it that. So I dealt with that. I dealt with the double mastectomy. I am a very strong person and kind of physically took one day at a time and got myself back on my feet. And then I had my ovaries removed, and I found myself in the middle of my lounge, and I felt like I was at the bottom of a swimming pool with no water in it, looking up, and I did not know where to turn. And I remember calling the doctor, and I said, I need help. I'm in the menopause and I do not know what to do. And she said to me, I think you need to go on antidepressants. And I was saying, I don't want to, I haven't so far, and I don't want to go on antidepressants. But by the end of the phone call, I said, just send them to my local pharmacist. So I ended up going on antidepressants. And that is the way that's the allopathic way. That's the natural way that doctors deal with it. They kind of put a plaster on it. They give you an antidepressant and you're off on your way. And like you said in the bio, it then took me to the beginning of lockdown, and I wasn't going into town anymore. I wasn't chasing my tail, and I had a lot more time to kind of stop and think. And I realized that my menopause symptoms had knocked me over. And with the time that I now had on my hands, I started immersing myself into all this research. I watched Cynthia Thurlow, as you said, her TED Talk. And I ended up actually reaching out to her and messaging her saying, because she left me wanting more from her talk. And I felt so lost. And her team wrote back to me, and we've been in touch ever since. I actually worked with her. She recommended a book called The Hormone Cure by Sarah Gottfried, which I've got tattered in my room because I've read it so many times. And I came to life reading this stuff, and I started changing my diet, and I started changing my my supplements and looking at hormones, and I started fasting. And I tell you, Patricia, my life changed. And every word that I was reading was really resonating with me. The hormones, the fasting, the fact that these other people were saying, doctors give you antidepressants and you're meant to go on your way. And it was like, yes, they did. That's what I had. Mm-hmm. And I said to my husband, I think I need to help other women. I've changed my life. I feel like a different person. Food, from fasting, from just change it, supplementing. I need to do this. I need to help women. And he said, you've got my full support. Off you go. So before I knew it, I turned 40 over lockdown, and I had all this money put away for my 40th party. I was going to have a big elaborate party. And then it was in April the 9th that I turned 40. So it was in key lockdown here in the UK. And then the next day, it was April the 10th, and the party hadn't happened, and we were still in lockdown, and I still had this money put aside for the party. And I said to my husband, I can't spend that money on a party. It seems so pointless. And the course, I looked up courses and how to where to begin to help women. And I came across a biomedicine course, naturopathic medicine. It's called the College of Naturopathic Medicine in King's Cross in London. And it was the same cost as my party. And I said, there you go, that's going to be my birthday present to myself. And now I'm studying biomedicine, and I'm in my first year. I feel very passionate about this. Other women should not be suffering and will not suffer when I help them. And that's where I am.
Wonderful. I love that. I truly believe in that as well. This podcast that I told you about coming out regarding menopause is in direct response to a very similar conversation I had with a doctor when I was going in with just early symptoms that I wasn't sure if they were perimenopause or not. I'm 43 years old. And her response was a gynecologist that I liked a lot up until that point. I'd seen her for several years, and she said, buckle up. It's just going to get worse from this. And I thought, as a health advocate, I don't want someone dropping me off a cliff like that. And woman to woman, we shouldn't be doing that to each other. We really need to be helping and conversing about and this dialogue that she had where it was just like, oh, it's awful, it's going to be awful, had I thought been very much so part of something of the past. I was like, people have we're creative people. There's apps for everything now. I just thought there's no way that this is still the rhetoric happening around this. And she's a well-respected individual. She's not old. She was not geriatric herself. I think she's around my age, but it's just, I think she wasn't to blame. It's part of the dogma. And in the United States, menopause is not discussed, and it's also not taught in the regular medical student curriculum. So unless you choose to go on to become an expert in it, and there are now certification programs that have only been around for about 10 years, there really wasn't a lot of studying you needed to do to get, to become an OBGYN. And so I think as I started to research it and unpack it, I thought I have 2 little girls. Everyone knows I have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. And I would never drop any of them off the cliff like that with just saying, well, it's going to affect 51% of the global population, but who knows? It's awful. And if it's going to affect global, it's going to affect not just women. It affects, and I love about your bio is it affects everyone in your reality, your family, your friends, anyone who loves you and touches you is affected by whatever you're experiencing throughout menopause. So everyone should have a very vested interest in it. And so this insight that you have that, your clients moving forward after you matriculate are going to have this person, this advocate who cares very much so about what they're going through and helping them through it is a beautiful thing for me. I want to talk really quickly before we get into defining fasting terms, which I want to do with you. But before we do that, in specific, when you started feeling this tailspin of menopausal outcome, I'm just curious, did you have sleep issues, weight issues, night sweats, brain fog? There's so many, there's just this litany of things you can suffer from. Was there one in particular that started making you feel incapacitated, or was it just all of them?
All of the above. And I think it's very individual. I think each person suffers from the menopause very differently. The difference with me, you said that you've been suffering perimenopausal symptoms. Remember, I had my ovaries removed. So one day I was very happily in hormonal balance and, ignorantly kind of going along. And the next minute I had my ovaries taken out and I went straight into the menopause. There was no easing my way into it. So I suffered from those huge mood swings. I suffered from a high cortisol, which I know now is a high cortisol. The hot flashes, not so much. I couldn't control my day-to-day moods, my temper, my sleep, and my waist. I make it sound doom and gloom, and I don't mind making it sound doom and gloom because I know that for me, having overcome every single one of those issues, it was the beginning of my life. That is when I sorted all this stuff out and I got on top of it, and I know that everyone else can, I felt like I had arrived. So I'm sorry if I'm painting a doom and gloom picture, but it's the beginning. So if your listeners are listening to this and are thinking, God, that sounds awful, it doesn't matter, because there is a way to overcome it. That is not just having like your consultant said to you, that you don't just need to slap a plaster on it. There are ways that we can overcome all of these issues. So there wasn't just one issue. There were lots of issues. I'll give you an example, Patricia. I was at the beginning of lockdown. I keep referring to them because it was a kind of time game changer for me. I was having 2 coffees a day. And then I'd have a call every morning with my work when I was in the media world at that point. So I'd have 2 coffees a day, and then I was going running every morning. And I'd sit at my computer and be like, right, I'm ready. Who do I need to speak to? And I'm kind of revved up, really, ready for the day. And what I didn't realize was my cortisol levels were through the roof. And so through reading Sarah Gottfried's, who's a Western trained doctor, but who's come to the way of thinking of much more of a naturopathic way, she was the one that suggested stopping coffee in her book. So I stopped coffee and I stopped running away from something that trying to get my weight down. And I started walking and doing much more gentle exercise. And so I found myself now in front of the computer in a much more, in a much softer, much gentler mood and ready to take on the world in a calmer way. And giving up coffee, strangely, was one of the biggest game changers for me. And it was lots of different tweaks that followed. And I'm still tweaking. I'm not sitting here kind of from a place of, oh, I've got it all sorted. I don't by any stretch. I play with my fast, which I know we're going to speak about every day. I'm a big emotional eater. I'm still working on that, and I'm still working on all these things. But it just makes me that much more relatable when I do speak to other women in the same position.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope that answered your question. Sorry.
No, you did. That was great. And I love that. And the description of going from that hypermania, it describes everyone I know who considers themselves to be successful and happy with their lives in their later 30s and early 40s with children, without, it's just this hypermanic way that they're like attacking their life, and they feel like they need to. And coffee is absolutely best friends. I have shirts that joke about it, and so it's a very interesting relationship to kind of call to question. And it's an interesting one with fasting, because I actually just spoke with someone, and I haven't read a faster yet that doesn't talk about using black coffee as a way to stimulate ketosis and to encourage the fasting benefits. And so I like the idea that you've excluded that. I think that's really unique. Before we get to that, I want to start off with just some terms. And again, this is not to cause anxiety with anyone or a gotcha moment. It's more so I understand the relationship that these terms have with your own brain. And so everyone listening can kind of garner a sense when you mention them of where you're coming from. So the first one is super simple. It's fasting. How would you define fasting?
A fasted state is opposite to a fed state. So it's your body in that rested state where you are burning stored fat, without getting too scientific, rather than burning the fuel that you're feeding it. So I think we're in two states. We're either in a fed state or we're in a fasted state. And when you're in a fasted state, your body is cleaning up. It's called autophagy. We kind of pronounce it differently, but it's a cleanup state for me.
Okay, and that drops us straight into autophagy. So is autophagy a cleaning up state?
Yeah. And again, I'm no expert, I'm no doctor. I am a huge advocate of it. I read all about it. But effectively, it's your body kind of cleaning out all the rubbish, all the stuff that you don't need. So you imagine your bins and all the bins kind of piling up. Autophagy is just your body's way of clearing out, of kind of getting rid of all that rubbish. And that in itself is on a cellular level in your body. It's so kind of good for every part of you. There's studies that it prevents disease. There's studies that it helps keep you looking young. There's studies that it helps you keep control of your weight. So it's a really important, for me anyway, it's a really important way to be, and I love it.
Yeah. How do you define intermittent fasting?
So for me, intermittent fasting is kind of, I said earlier, just before, I said you're either in a fed state or you're in a fasted state. So I fast mainly when I'm asleep, but I extend that. So I will fast. At the moment, I'm up to 17 hours a day. So I fast every night. I finish my dinner and then I'll probably start eating late morning the next day. And I intermittently fast. I'm not fasting the whole time. I'm kind of fasting, eating. So I'm intermittently fasting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Which kinds of fasts have you tried? So you talk about being up to 17 hours a day. And when you say that, I'm assuming that you mean you're living 17 hours in a fasted state and allowing yourself an eating window outside of those 17 hours.
Yeah, exactly. That's really mainly it. I started at 12 hours when I started this whole process. And I was very, very kind and very gentle to myself. I did it. I just started with 12 and then I pushed it until eventually I got to 16. I was at 16 for quite a while. And then only recently I thought to myself, okay, I've still got a little bit more weight that I want to lose. I'm just toying with it. My friend, one of my best friends, does 1 meal a day. She calls it OMAD, and she has great success with that. and it's very inspiring. We could kind of share stories. But for me, I'm happy with where I'm at, and I continue to tweak it, and we'll continue to do so until I am happy. But I'm the happiest I've been in a long time with this all.
Yeah. When you play with your fasting, do you in turn also kind of tweak what you're eating during your eating windows? Do you allow yourself to eat succinct meals? Do you just open it up to whatever you feel like? Do you snack? And how many meals do you usually eat during your eating window?
Yeah, that's a good question for me because I have limits. And so my kind of basic rules are 3 meals a day, no snacking in between. And those 3 meals, I really gravitate towards whole food. So I actually start my day on a smoothie, and then I'll have things like eggs and maybe spinach and a bit of vegetable for lunch. But I said to you at the beginning, and I'm going to kind of tell you my shortfalls. I am a big emotional eater. I have a real problem with that, and I'm working on that right now. So if I deny myself foods, if I have too light a lunch, I'll fall down at dinner time. So I'm really playing with the fact that I need to increase my lunch so that I don't fall down and get tired at dinner. I'm studying a lot at the moment, and then I've got the kids that I'm running around after. So yeah, my kind of basic rules are 3 meals a day, whole foods, and no snacking in between.
Okay. And what are the largest misconceptions that you hear about fasting when you speak with people about it, when you share that you're playing around with intermittent fasting? What are the largest misconceptions that you hear about right now?
I think that people want a quick fix. I think we're very impatient beings. And I think that they go into this and they expect to see immediate weight loss. And I don't think it works like that. I think what it does is it rewires your whole system. So by fasting, you can then be so in tune with what is affecting you. For example, I didn't realize that brown rice and I do not get on. But through fasting, I slowed down and I rewired, say that again, I rewired everything. And I realized, hold on, I don't get on with this food. It doesn't agree with me. And so I cut it out. So I think when I speak to people about it, I say to them, and Jen Stevens, who wrote the most wonderful book, Delay Don't Deny, is a great, she talks about this, about doing 28 days and then tweaking. And I think she's got such a golden point there where for 28 days, just do 12 hours at least, try and extend it. And then once you've got into that rhythm, then you can start tweaking things a little bit more.
Yeah. It's an interesting relationship. I speak with, you would think that from the outset, I think that just considering fasting sends the normal non-fasted brain into a sense of tension and stress and fear that evokes this. And what's opposite is from those that practice it that I've seen is this state of calm and reevaluation, as you're talking about, this reconversation with everything from food groups to how much and when and what is necessarily needed, from the food. There's a constant reevaluation that from the outset it would seem to be scary and threatening and hyper. And when people practice it, there's a freedom and an exercise of education that it sounds like even you are unpacking, which I find to be just so common across everything. People write in and they were wondering about someone such as yourself. This is an interesting one because you were so affected by Cynthia Thurlow's TEDx and different things that you've seen online. Are there current personalities or sources that you kind of trust, YouTube channels or people that are constantly proffering information on a weekly basis that you look to kind of learn more about your fasting as you're educating yourself and going back to school?
Dr. Jason Fung. He is a trained doctor, a Western trained doctor, and through seeing so many people come in and with this and that ailment, and the way that he was taught to approach his people, he's kind of tipped that on its head, and he is a massive advocate now of fasting. So sometimes people in this world can maybe don't have the gravitas that doctors do, because that's what we're used to and that's what we're taught to believe in. But Dr. Jason Fung has come from that world and sees a different way, sees a much more natural way. And he wrote an incredible book called The Fasting Lane, gobbled that up as well, with Megan Ramos and Eve Mayer. And it was fantastic to have him on board to pull them, through, to kind of give them that, effectively, that credibility. So yeah, they're and Jen Stevens and Cynthia Thurlow, they're kind of all American based, and so I want to bring it to the UK. I really do. It's a real, I'm looking all in the US, and I can see that you guys are doing such good things out there, and the people here need to know it's okay. Like, it's not a calorie in, calorie out. It's not. I don't want to name check any groups, because I belong to some of these groups, Patricia, for years, and I would go around saying, oh, you've got to go to this weight loss group. It's great. And each week I'd go and I'd get weighed and I'd be a slave to it. And I'm not a slave to this. I feel so passionately about it. We are, from a primitive point of view, we used to do this thousands of years ago. Food wasn't readily available to us. So we're going back to how we were designed for. So yeah, you can hear I feel very passionately about it. But they're the names I look up to.
Mentioning that quickly, the Fasting Lane, Eve Mayer was on and speaking with us a couple of months ago for this podcast series. And she is a great personality. She has her own podcast. I think she's a fantastic person and personality. And I think she brings a lot to, Jason Fung's, the book, because of the tenor of the medicine and things behind it. Her inspiration was to have a real person attached to it, with writing in tandem The Fasting Lane, which I loved the idea of. I think it's necessary and crucial. And in that note, one of Eve's most famous things is telling me her pitfalls. And she shares this with her audience a lot too. She's Southern. She's got a lot of different attributes with food. When you come from the Southern United States, there's a great love affair with foods that aren't perceived as healthy or ways of eating, and it's celebratory. And I think every culture can kind of identify with that. But she's very clear about her pitfalls, and I think that it's that clarity of relationship that fasters start to get with, even when they struggle, they know more of why they struggle instead of this kind of unknown universe. And that clarity that comes along with, even physiologically, which is what fasting brings along, but then the conversation becomes clear as well. And on that note, do you have pitfalls yourself? What do you find to be the hardest aspects or triggers for sabotage when you're fasting?
Yeah. And I think it's really important to kind of talk about these. And I said to you, emotional eating, I said it before, I'm playing with my fed window. I'm playing every day with, not kind of denying myself or going into the day feeling like I'm on diet and then falling at the end of the day. I need to kind of allow myself to have my smoothie, which makes me feel great and helps me with the menopause symptoms. I'm having supplements like magnesium and ashwagandha, which are incredible for the menopause, which is another podcast that we'll do. But and then I kind of have this mentality of, right now I've got to diet, or eat my low kind of, not low fat, very against low fat, but almost deny myself some of the bigger lunches that I would have had, because by doing that I've ended up falling down by dinner time and binge eating. Sometimes it's not easy for me to say that, but yeah, I'm binge eating and it's not great. So I'm playing with my emotional eating. They are my gremlins and I'm facing up to them. But that has become, you're right, that as part of this process, that's kind of been sifted to the top of the surface. And I have to deal with that.
Yeah. There's, it's interesting. You mentioned binge eating, and I mentioned that I do it, and I still do it from time to time. And someone wrote in and said, that's impossible. You don't look like you do it. And I said, no, it's, if you actually look up the definition, the medical definition of binge eating, I think that a lot of people would discover they do indeed do it. And I do it with the worst things. I do it with the sweets, with the crisps, the salty, the cookies, the ice cream. And it's ironic. And then I looked at, like, I sometimes binge eat foods that I think, oh, I need tons of that to feel full, so I'll binge eat a salad. It doesn't matter if it's healthy or unhealthy. It's eating a certain excessive amount of food, and doing it in a state of fear. So thinking that you won't be full, you won't have enough, all of those types of things are very much so accompanied with it. And it is a term that's hard to kind of admit for some reason, at least about myself. I find the same hesitancy with saying that. But then there's the subsequent freedom that comes from actually owning one's truth as well.
Yeah.
I'd love to tap into mental benefits. This is a big one for you because of, as you approached IF, but the brain fog that's attached to menopause, and you were dropped off a cliff. I'm glad you clarified that, because from all of my studies, people say that the cruelest that they've ever seen is when someone wakes up fully in menopause. And they said, and those people who have the ovaries removed go to sleep, usually not in a huge state of it, and wake up in full-blown menopause. And so first of all, I'm wondering, before we climb into the mental clarity, did anyone who was, you were undergoing the surgery say, listen, you're going to wake up in this full-blown menopausal state. These are some of the symptoms that you may have. You need to contact us if it becomes unbearable. Was there any education, any post advice given that you kind of were looking out for?
I had a file of where I would keep all my stuff. But remember, it was pretty, looking back, it was pretty full on 5 years. So my mum passed away in 2015. I had my second child 2 months later. Then I got tested for the BRCA. You kind of know the story. I don't need to go over it, but it was quite like one thing after another. And I kept a file of stuff. And I went through it the other day, and there was a leaflet right in the middle of all this pile of paper, and it said, menopause help here. And so, remember, I didn't really have my mum around to say to me, Steph, This is what's going to happen. You have to do this. And I've got my dad and my two brothers who would have no concept of it. So it was mentioned to me in passing, and that was it. But it was only when I was experiencing full-blown symptoms that I thought to myself, I do not need to be doing it. There is another way. I know it. I know it. And it's not fair, I can handle my mum. Why can't I handle this?
Yeah. Cynthia Thurlow does a good job also in her talk about that, where she talks about, that she's so passionate about getting the information out there. And her talk is brief for anyone listening. It's just enough, I feel like, to whet the appetite, but it's also just enough to spark the information. And she speaks to her colleagues. She speaks to, people in the industry of medicine, in the Western industry, and to how everyone needs to know about this. They need to be talking to their clients and patients about it. As far as the mental clarity is concerned, this is a big one kind of in the area that you're in, because if people haven't been curious about IF, there's certain stage markers that people start to, it's a health scare, and there's, disease prevention, health, and social impacting, and then stages of life like menopause, an onset of something with a stage of life that accompanies that. And then there's academics. And these people, so I came at fasting from that realm. And since the beginning of time, old academics and philosophers have been fasting for mental clarity. And so it wasn't something that had been unknown to me, or a tool that a lot of people used, not eating before exams or writing a book or something like that were common pieces of information. And so it didn't shock me that with phases like menopause, where one of the key factors is a brain fog. And this also speaks to geriatric. There are a lot of 65-year-olds that come to IF because early onset of dementia and geriatric, diseases start to set in. And one of the things that IF is kind of known for is this clarity of mind that can happen and lifting the brain fog. I'm wondering, with you, did that take place? Is it still taking place? Is the mental clarity as addictive for you as the physical characteristics of fasting? How does that play in?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I have gone from a very comfortable media sales job where I knew what I was talking about, and I could sell and speak to lots of people, and into this world of biomedicine where there were these excruciatingly long words that I had to learn and remember and continue to learn and remember. And I do so in a way that has shocked me. Now, I put it down to the fact that I am very interested in this subject and want to learn it and need to learn it to kind of have some credibility. I have surprised myself along the way with how much I've understood, because I did have brain fog before, and I don't appreciate how much brain fog I had until now. There wasn't one moment where it lifted the brain fog. There wasn't one supplement that I took that lifted the brain fog. It was a succession of things that I did. I read a wonderful book by Jim Quick called Limitless, which was a game changer for me. And that taught me how to learn. And the more I learned, the better my brain became. I found with exercising, if I exercise on a fasted state, so I only really exercise in the morning when I'm still fasting, I know what I'm doing. I've got clarity. I have energy. You know, is it the fasting that's doing this? I think that's a big part of it. And I think that when you start that habit of fasting, it has this wonderful positive knock-on effect to the rest of your world. And each of those areas, including brain fog, just get better and better. I'm now, I'm slightly disappointed that I'm still binge eating sometimes, but I'm human. And when I overcome it, when I overcome it, that will just be another hurdle that I would have overcome and can relate to. But brain fog is yesterday's news for me.
Excellent. That's going to be music to a lot of people's ears who are listening. Do you have any tools or devices that you used or that you want to use in regards to measuring? There's glucometers, ketone strips, blood ketone meters, the software and apps and pieces of, there's breathalyzer things now that people use to kind of incorporate. Do you use any of them, or do you intend to?
No, my dad is pre-diabetic, and so we've started toying with monitoring our blood sugar levels. So he's my guinea pig, and he's lost about 12 pounds. His blood sugar levels have come right down. So he's brilliant, to kind of work with on this. My only tool that I love is my app, and it's one of the fasting apps. And I guess from a mental point of view, when I finish my dinner and I know that I pressed start fast on this app, for me, that's my commitment. That's my kind of sign to myself that that's it. I can't eat until tomorrow. And for me, that's all I need. I don't need anything else. I just need that one app.
Yeah, there's been a lot of feedback about apps that people didn't expect as well. This kind of, they felt accompanied. When they felt a little yucky, they'd look down and see how far they'd come. There's a lot of different secondary results that I think people are getting from apps that they hadn't anticipated. Do you belong to any groups regarding fasting in the same light as these apps that keep you motivated or informed on Facebook or otherwise that you subscribe to, or have you kind of just peppered and done as you chose?
I do. I am a member of these Facebook groups, but for me personally, I guess I don't really have time to sit and chat, because if I'm not studying, I'm reading about it. And if I'm not reading a book about it, I'm reading a paper about it, research. So I don't have time to converse with others. I guess the only one I did do was with Cynthia. We had an intermittent fasting group that she invited me to, which I'm a member of. But I'm just, I guess I'm one of the quieter ones in the group. I've got so much I need to read and learn, and can constantly do that. So,
no, definitely. Taking on school with family and other obligations is crazy. I remember in graduate school, someone would say, "Oh, you do so much reading. I'd love to have you look over this book I'm reading." And I thought, there's no way that is ever going to happen. Yeah. Exactly. I used to say, sure, after graduation. I'm wondering, we have a lot of people that write in asking if you've spoken to your doctors about intermittent fasting. Cynthia, as I said, this is part of her TED Talk, that doctors should in fact be talking to their clients about it. But have you spoken to your general practitioner or your female specialist, menopausal specialist, anyone like that about intermittent fasting? And if so, what's been the feedback they've given you?
No, I haven't. I don't have a menopause specialist. I don't have a doctor that I can go to, but I'm going to. I know inherently I'm going to be knocking on their doors, and I kind of want to pioneer this. Like I said, a lot of the people that I look up to and follow are all based in the US. I don't really know anyone in the UK that kind of is pushing this as much as I am. Definitely not in my area, but that is on my to-do list.
Yeah,
to knock on their door. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. After COVID too, right?
Correct.
I'm wondering, the final question that everyone asks is, what are your future personal goals for fasting? And do you even think about it this way? And if so, do you look at the next week? Do you look at tomorrow? Do you look at just today? Do you look at it in a couple of months? Where are you kind of headed towards that, and how do you set up your timeline?
Yeah, it is in my timeline, 100%. I'm on a path here, and I'm on a bigger path than I think I know. Hence, kind of you guys reaching out to me. It was like, oh, okay, this is what this new world is bringing. I need to get the voice out there and the voice heard. I was going to these weight loss groups for about 5 years, and each week I'd go there and we'd learn about a different low fat food and a different, how much people had lost that week or put on and struggles, and it just felt slightly antiquated to me. So my goal is to set up some kind of clinic where people can come in and we can talk about fasting all together, and we can play with it together. We can share highs and lows, and a place where they can come and we can just talk about it. Men, women, ill, healthy, all walks of life. And I want people who are feeling helpless to know that it's okay, like there is another way, and this is the way in my eyes. I'm not going to preach about it, but I'm definitely going to support.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stefanie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you speaking with us today and giving us your personal story and all of your expertise. I look forward to finding out what the future of this, the biomedical degree that you're obtaining and everything else, and where it leads you in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. Nice talking.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, we have been speaking with Stefanie Daniels. She is a student and a supporter of women in perimenopause and menopause in conjunction with intermittent fasting. You can find out more about her journey and her story, as well as directly message her on her Instagram. It's at life_begins_at_menopause. And from all of us at Patricia Kathleen Podcast, thank you so much for listening. Remember